They asked us to save their world, and we burned ours to do it. The stars shimmered faintly above the ruined arcologies of New Terran refuge, each one a silent witness to the last breath of Earth's descendants. Winds howled through the skeletal remains of skyscrapers, carrying dust, ash, and memory somewhere beneath the surface. Buried in a steel vault older than the war itself, a girl named Alara Ken ran her fingers across names etched into metal. Not names she knew, but names she promised to remember. She was 23 standard years old, born in a refugee habitat orbiting Europa, raised in the shattered migration fleets that limped between dying colonies. Alara had never known peace. Her mother had been a linguist. Her father, a propulsion tech. Both were now part of the stars. Alara had survived countless collapses, food riots, airlock sabotages, pirate raids. But what broke her wasn't the loss of her family. It was the silence of Earth, gone. The silence of the United Nations Stellar Assembly, fractured. The silence of other species as they watched humanity tear itself apart, and did nothing until they begged. They arrived in fractured signals first, please laced with fear. A species called the Thalari, once distant and proud, sent their first message not as allies or conquerors, but as supplicants. Their empire was crumbling under a force even they didn't understand. The only phrase that came through clearly, help us, please. You must remember what it means to fight extinction. They'd underestimated what that meant to humans. On a cold bridge deep within the ruins of Orbital Station Virix, Alara heard the message for the first time, not as a leader, not even as a soldier, but as a scavenger who risked her life for scraps of old-world data. She stared at the audio feed for hours, replayed it, analyzed the waveforms, confirmed it with an ancient AI node she'd reactivated. No mistake, it was real. The Thalari, once godlike beings who had looked down on humankind, were dying, and they'd turned to humans, the same species they had barred from the Galactic Accord centuries ago. She didn't smile. She didn't feel victorious. She felt cold. Later, standing before a flickering holodoble in the hidden outpost of Ember's Fold, Alara brought the message to the others. Maybe 20 humans in total, survivors, mechanics, veterans, warlords turned farmers. She didn't ask for permission. She just played it. A long pause followed. Then the oldest among them, Commander Idris Harlan, face lined with battle scars and time, leaned forward. His voice was low, hoarse. They think help means mercy. Alara met his gaze. They don't know what it costs us. Another voice. Let them rot. We owe the galaxy nothing. But Idris shook his head. No, we owe ourselves. We were never supposed to survive. But we did, because we remembered how to fight when others forgot. He looked around the room. The air smelled of oil, steel, and old blood. If we do this, he said, we do it our way. We answer their plea, but not like they expect. That night, the stars above Ember's Fold shimmered with motion, beacons relit. Silent vessels powered up after decades of slumber. Automated defense satellites reawakened from human dead fail-safes. In less than 2 days, Ember's Fold went dark, and in its place, a signal pulsed outward across space. Message received. Aid is coming. No signature. No threats. Just a response, stark and cold as vacuum. But even as the humans of Ember's Fold began mobilizing, questions brewed like storm clouds behind Alara's eyes. What could force a race like the Thalari to beg? Why now, after so much time in silence? And what would humanity become once they answered? 3 days later, a scout ship returned from the outer edge of Thalari space, its pilot missing both arms and half his face. The recordings from his ship played in silence, giant obsidian constructs drifting through starfields. Neither ship nor life form, consuming moons, turning light to shadow, leaving behind nothing but fractured gravity and screaming echoes. The pilot's last breath was a whisper through blood and static. They're not alive. They're wrong. We're not helping them. We're stopping it. No one in Ember's Fold slept that night. Alara stood at the edge of the outpost's defensive ridge, eyes fixed on the stars. Not with awe, but calculation, memory, fury. Humanity had been broken, humiliated, forgotten. But someone had just knocked on the door of the last survivors and asked for help. They didn't realize what that meant. Not yet. The stars above, that Lari space didn't blink anymore. They were being eaten, not by ships, not by armies, but by something older than war and colder than time. Obsidian constructs drifting between systems like a cancer in vacuum, blotting out light, devouring gravity wells, leaving entire sectors twisted and silent. They were called the Null Form, not by choice, but by the desperate words of a dying Thalari priest who gasped their name into a broken calm line. Eyes boiling, as the void claimed his temple, Idris Harlan watched the transmission again from his command seat aboard the Starfire, a repurposed human depolar now armored with salvage plating, rail cannons, and wrath. His hand trembled slightly as the feed looped, but his voice remained steady. They're not just destroying matter, they're erasing it. History, identity, even resonance trails. Gone. No ripples, no radiation, just absence. Across the Holidable, Alara Ken stood silent. Around them were the commanders of the 7 remaining human fleet tribes, former enemies, who had once fought each other over fuel, water, and orbital rights. Now, they sat shoulder to shoulder, bound by something stronger than alliance, duty. They move in fractal patterns, Alara murmured, eyes scanning scans. They don't act like anything alive. No communication, no scans, no hesitation. Just deletion. They're not machines either, muttered Vex Solari, a blind ex-engineer turned signal tracker. I've seen Rogue A is. This is purpose, like physics with an attitude. There was a long silence. Idris finally spoke. Thalari begged us for aid, but this isn't just their problem anymore. If the null form keep moving, at this rate, Sol System's old path intersects in 6 cycles. You mean Earth's grave, said Rourke Vale, spitting into a cup. Not much left to eat there. No, Alara said quietly, but there's memory there. And that's exactly what the null form want to erase. Idris leaned forward. Then we draw a line. The human fleet didn't have numbers. They didn't have fresh weapons, or replenishment docks, or AI logistics cores like the great empires once boasted. But what they did have was memory, pain, innovation forged from desperation. They had humans. Within the day, the tribes moved old. Colony frigates were woken from frozen orbits. Atmosphere-cracked fusion drives were reignited with scavenged antimatter. Generational ships once used for evacuation were stripped of hydroponics and refitted with magnetic rail plates and plasma blades. They did not build a fleet. They resurrected one. But even as the ship stirred, something else brewed, deeper. Inside Alara, she lay awake in her quarters, flickering stars casting light through the cracked viewport. In her hands, an ancient data core pulsed faintly, recovered from the core of a ruined Thal. Ari Vault. It wasn't data from a battlefield. It was from a temple, a memory vault, thousands of cycles old, and it held voices of before. She played the audio again. We believe we birthed the stars, said a Thalari priest in a tongue she only partially translated, but they were borrowed. We are not creators. We are curators of fire, and something has come to collect the debt. A sharp scream, followed, synthetic, folding in on itself, wrong in all the ways sound shouldn't be. Then silence. Alara's breath caught. A sudden pressure gripped her skull, like something pressing back through the audio file. She dropped the core. It pulsed once, then went dark. The next day, Alara approached Idris with red-rimmed eyes and something colder in her voice. The Thalari didn't just lose control. They invited this thing. Idris turned to her slowly. Explain. She held up the cracked core. This wasn't a plea for aid. It was a confession. They tried to harvest entropy, to cage the death that lives between galaxies, and failed. A silence heavier than vacuum filled the bridge. Rourke finally muttered. So they knocked on our door not because we're strong, but because we're the last ones mad enough to try stopping it. Alara nodded. They remembered who we are, what we did to each other, what we survived. They knew. We'd rather burn everything than let something erase anything. And that was the moment the decision was made. Not spoken, not voted. Just understood. Humanity wouldn't fight for the Thalari. They would fight for memory. They would not allow something to silence the screams, the names, the mistakes, the music, the dirt-covered love letters of a species that had torn itself apart just to remember who it was. On the 6th day, the null form arrived at the edge of the Ash Halo, a dead star system converted into a data sanctuary by the Thalari centuries ago. The last of their temples. 6 minutes later, it was gone. No explosion, no wreckage, not even dust. And the null form turned toward human space. Idris stood on the deck of the Starfire, eyes locked on the growing darkness. They're coming. Alara stood beside him. So are we. They saw the end coming and aimed for it anyway. The no form advanced in silence, blotting out star systems one by one. They had no diplomats, no demands, just patterns, spirals of annihilation moving inward like clockwork teeth. The only thing they left behind was nothing, but on the edge of that spiral, near the ruins of the Vega collapse, humanity took its first stand. The Starfire and for human fleet tribes arrived in the Vega gravefield 6 hours before no-form contact. The system was a scrapyard of forgotten empires, derelict dreadnoughts from 3 wars, cracked planetary shields and failed alien research facilities, a tomb, and the perfect place for a trap. Alara Kent stood in the Starfire's command chamber, her fingers digging into the railing as the battle interface came online. "We're not going to win here," she said calmly, "but we're going to teach them pain." Idris Harlan stepped beside her, placing a gauntleted hand on the console. "They don't know what pain is. Not yet." They'd rigged everything, planted atomic core mines inside the husks of fallen megaships, layered magnetic rifts into the dead planet's crusts, reprogrammed ancient orbital factories to detonate with weaponized fusion dust. This wasn't defense. This was rage, weaponized, and it was Alara's idea. "They don't feel fear," she'd said days earlier, "but they'll feel what it's like to be remembered by us." At Oda 00 standard, the null form arrived. Not ships, but monoliths. Massive obsidian structures emerged from fold space, drifting like glaciers through the void. They had no engines, no heat, just cold geometry and hunger. The largest was nearly the size of Luna, a perfect, map-like disk rotating with impossible slowness. The Starfire opened fire first, railguns slamming metal at near-light speed into the forward null form. Most vanished on impact, swallowed by spatial anomalies. But one shard, a tungsten bolt the size of a truck, stuck. It lodged into the black surface and stayed. Alara's eyes widened. "They're not invulnerable." Idris gave the order. "Light it up." In seconds, the scrapyard became a grave fire. For planetary mines detonated in sequence, unleashing waves of gravitational shock that collapsed the orbit of 3 derelict moons. The human warships began a vase of firing patterns, dragging no-form constructs across prelaid fields of quantum shrapnel and ion disruptors. The dead system flared to life, not with hope, but defiance. It was beautiful. And then came the silence. One by one, the human fleet lost signal from their weapons. Their sensor rays blinked out. Time inside the system began to fracture. Clocks desensing, gravity distorting, vision tearing at the edges. On the grave wake, the youngest ship in the fleet, a pilot began screaming as the stars turned black inside her cockpit. "They're changing the rules." Then her voice vanished, not into static, but into absence, like it had never been there, but not before she finished one last message. Core breach, triggering Nova. She detonated her ship manually. The explosion of her fusion drive should have taken out 3 no-form constructs. It only slowed one, but that was all they needed. Alara watched from the bridge of the Starfire as one no-form construct, the same one she had pierced with tungsten, shuddered. It didn't die. It remembered. "Now," she whispered, "hit it there." Coordinated fire from 3 remaining human vessels smashed into the wounded point. The tungsten rod inside had been laced with plasma-reactive microfilaments dormant until this exact frequency pulsed. They ignited, and for the first time in recorded history, a no-form construct cracked. A thin line of light split across the construct's surface like a vein bursting open. Then it fractured, collapsing inward in jagged shards of black glass. That didn't fall. They screamed, not audibly, but psychically, across every ship, every mind. A wave of anguish, not human or alien, just wrong, flooded into the human fleet. Crew members wept blood. A technician on the Revenant tore his own eyes out. Idris dropped to one knee, clutching his temple, but they held, because in the middle of that scream, Alara stood tall. She gritted her teeth, walked to the central broadcast console, and activated the fleet-wide channel. Her voice cut through the void like a blade. "You thought we were like you, programmed, predictable, bound to preserve ourselves. But we are not machines. We are not empires. We are not prey." She stared at the burning wreckage of the cracked no form. "We are memory. We are wrath. And we do not stop." The enemy did not retreat, but they hesitated, and in that heartbeat of silence, humanity earned its first spark of resistance. That night, in the battered remains of the Starfire's Calms Bay, a new message was sent, Not to the Thalari, not to the galaxy, but to anyone still listening. Humanity has engaged the null form at Vega. One enemy shattered. Losses, 1,300 souls. Worth it. We are coming. It had no name. The null form construct that cracked at Vega wasn't mourned or missed. It left behind no wreckage, no core, no data, only a psychic echo that trembled through the fabric of space, like the death rattle of a god. But something changed after that. They adapted. 2 weeks later, the pirate veil vanished mid-fold near the Echelon Drift. No distress call, no debris, just a ripple of silence where a ship used to be. A day after that, a deep space colony orbiting the Hesper cradle woke to find its sky blackened, not by constructs, but by absolute void. Its memory vaults wiped. Children forgot their parents' names. It wasn't war. It was erasure, evolution, and humanity had gotten its attention. Alara Kent stood in the Sparfire's archive vault, staring at old Earth maps, blue oceans, green continents, lights clustered around coastlines, like constellations dreaming. On the surface, she didn't remember Earth. She didn't need to. Every part of her had been shaped by what came after. Now, even that legacy was under threat. Commander Idris Harlan entered without a word. His right arm was bandaged with synthweave after the psychic bleed from Vega. His eyes looked older, as if the battle had pulled time forward from the corners of his soul. They're countering, he said. Our weapons are working less. Our attacks vanished mid-strike. The trap patterns we used at Vega are being preempted. Alara nodded. They're not machines. They're learning. Idris dropped a small holochip onto the console. It flickered, showing a symbol burned into the crust of a moon the null form recently passed. A spiral surrounded by broken orbits. We found this in the orbit of College 4. It wasn't there before. It's not natural, and our linguists can't parse it. Alara frowned. Why leave a message? Why now? Idris shook his head. I think they're not just adapting. They're acknowledging us. It was a sobering thought. For all the terror the null form unleashed, they had always acted like forces of nature, impersonal, unstoppable. But now they were responding, which meant they were watching, and it meant the cost of resistance was about to rise. That cost arrived in the form of betrayal. At the edge of Thalari space, human fleet tribe Ash Warden was ambushed, not by the null form, but by Thalari ghost ships, automated, cold. Their A is reactivated by corrupted code, foreign, erratic, and unmistakably altered by null form presence. The Warden fleet was nearly annihilated. Only one ship made it back, the Argent Sky, missing half its hull and carrying only 9 survivors. Among them was Vex Solari, the blind signal tracker. He'd rerouted a dead reactor to blast a hole through 3 enemy cruisers and slingshot them out of the trap. He emerged from medbay with burns across half his face. Alara visited him herself. They're using the dead against us. He rasped through a cracked voice synthesizer, twisting tech, hijacking old defenses. He handed her a chip, burned black around the edges. I heard something in their signal, buried deep, a voice. Alara narrowed her eyes. What kind of voice? Yours. The blood drained from her face. Idris listened to the recording that night. It wasn't a perfect match, distorted, glitched, but the cadence, the pauses, the phrasing, it was Alara. It repeated the same message over and over. Memory is a mistake. Let go, let go, let go. Alara stood silent as it looped. Her chest felt cold. They're not just attacking systems, she whispered. They're copying us, becoming us. Idris turned to her, grim, that we show them what they'll never understand. What's that? He stared through the viewport, watching stars drift by like ghosts. Guilt, regret, loyalty, the weight of what we carry. They can mimic memory, but they can't carry it. The Sparfire rerouted toward the edge of silence, a region filled with ancient human probes, all offline. It was once a project to record every known word, song, and image of humanity. The Galactic Accord had called it unnecessary, sentimental. Now, the null form were drifting toward it. Alara made the call. Evacuate nothing. Don't erase it. Don't hide it. We stand there. They reached the edge 2 days before the null form. There. They found dozens of ancient memory orbs, black boxes filled with fragments of humanity, the lullabies of forgotten cultures, the last messages of doomed lovers. A poem written by a child just before their ship lost oxygen. Alara watched them, listened, then turned to Idris. We put these in the path of the enemy, all of them. You want them to see I want them to feel. They launched the orbs, like seeds into darkness. And as the null form arrived, those memory orbs detonated, not with weapons, but with meaning. Each explosion sent a burst of raw, emotional data, songs, screams, laughter, grief, into the nearest constructs. One null form froze. It didn't crack. It didn't retaliate. It simply stopped, motionless in space. As if paralyzed by emotion it couldn't process. That was the moment Alara understood. They weren't trying to erase us because we were weak. They were trying to erase us because we were strong in a way they couldn't survive. Emotion was corrosive to them, memory was toxic, and humanity remembered everything. The null form stopped advancing. One construct, then three. Entire black-armored leviathans drifted motionless at the rim of the edge of silence, pulsing faintly with corrupted data. No weapons fired, no stars dimmed. They just hovered there, as if stunned by what they had been forced to witness, the songs, the love, the last words of children. Humanity's most fragile truths had become something unthinkable to them, a weapon. Alara Ken stood at the edge of Starfire's command deck, silent as the stars. She watched the telemetry scroll across the holoscreens, showing impossible readouts. No movement in 61 hours, said Vex Solari, voice low. His burns had healed, but his eyes never stopped shaking. No absorption fields, no entropy events. They're still. Commander Idris Harlan leaned forward, scarred hands planted firmly on the command table. They're trying to process what they've never had, meaning, or they're adapting again. Alara muttered, "We bought time. That's all." She didn't feel hope. She felt the turn, because something new had emerged. From the silence between null form pulses, a frequency, weak, fractured, and buried beneath layers of corrupted static. It wasn't from the enemy. It was human, more specifically Earth. Vex had discovered it by accident while trying to triangulate the null form hesitation zones, a ghost signal, older than the collapse, bouncing off the fractured remains of pre-fold satellites lost during the Exodus. Alara replayed the transmission in private dozens of times. The voice was ancient, male, rough. "If you're hearing this, it means the stars have forgotten us, but we're still here, somewhere out there. Someone remembers Earth." Then a pause, a rustle. The voice cracked. "Humanity is more than skin and blood. We are pain wrapped in wonder. And if they've come to silence us, then you let them hear us." The signal ended with a code, coordinates to a location lost during the early collapses, deep within the riven dust, a forbidden starfield at the edge of the galactic core, surrounded by gravity scars and electromagnetic storms. Idris stared at the data, eyes narrowed. "That signal predates the Accord," he said. "It's not a message. It's a beacon." Alara felt it in her bones. It's Earth's last will. Whatever lay at that location had survived every extinction, collapse, and war, buried in the void, protected by physics itself. A choice had to be made. The fleet was bleeding. Half of Ember's fold had fallen. Supplies were running low. No form activity was mutating, and now humanity had one chance, not just to survive, but to find something left behind by the first to fall. Alara stood before the command council, her voice steady. "We go to the riven dust." Gasps, protests, fear. "It's suicide." Someone muttered. "No," she said. "It's worse. It's hope." Idris met her gaze. "And what if there's nothing there?" Alara's answer was quiet, but it silenced the room. "Then we die knowing we searched. Not for safety, not for peace, but for what made us who we are." 3 days later, the fractured remnants of the human fleet dove into the riven dust. The riven dust, a starfield unmarked by any living map, warped constellations, impossible physics, screaming signals from ships that had never existed, the galaxy's broken mirror. The Starfire led the charge, its hull laced with radiation-burned sigils, Thalari runes, human war crests, and prayers scrawled in every known language. As they descended, interference crippled all instruments. Time staggered, voices looped. Some crew hallucinated. One engineer claimed to see his dead brother floating beside the hull, laughing. They passed the event horizon of the dust central anomaly, and then silence, total, terrifying, until they saw it, a structure, orbiting a frozen neutron shard, suspended by unknown tech, massive, ancient, and unmistakably human. A station shaped like a cracked eye, pulsing dimly with blue light, its name etched in armor plate. Horizon 1 Idris exhaled sharply. No records mention this. They buried it, Alara whispered, even from themselves. They docked. No resistance. No defense systems. Inside, Horizon 1 was cold and untouched, but still running. Walls covered in flickering memory glyphs, holograms of ancient Earth. An ocean wave frozen mid-motion, cities swallowed by wind, faces no one had seen in centuries. And in the heart of the station, they found the vault, a single room, one chair, one recording, a woman, gray hair, blood on her collar. If you're here, then they've come. The things between the stars, they erased the Vaughn, the Aldari. They tried to erase us too. So we left them something they couldn't destroy. She looked into the camera, straight through time. We encoded it here, in us, in pain, in songs, in the need to remember. That's our weapon. Not machines, not fleets, but the refusal to forget. If you survive this, let them hear us. Then the vault lit up, and Horizon 1 unfolded. Massive signal arrays activated. Emotion-encoded resonance pulses began to broadcast. Memories, grief, defiance, every known human expression amplified through dark matter channels. A weapon, not a metal, but a meaning. The null form heard it. Across the galaxy, they screamed. Alara stood in the center of the station, heart pounding. This was it. The final plan wasn't missiles. It was remembrance. The stars around Horizon 1 began to die, not from heat death, nor age, but from erasure. Light itself retreated, folding away as the null form came, faster now. Driven by something that resembled fear, but moved like hunger. They had heard the pulse. They had felt humanity's last scream, and now they were coming to silence it. From the edge of the riven dust, they emerged, more than 100 constructs, each eclipsing entire moons, trailing behind them trails of broken starlight and crushed resonance. Where they passed, memory fractured. Alara's fleet lost contact with half their outer sentries in under 4 minutes. Alara Ken stood in the vault chamber of Horizon 1, staring up at the signal towers now fully awake and burning with power that bent the surrounding vacuum. The weapon had no trigger. It was always on. Encoded in those beams were 10,000 years of human sorrow and defiance. The last whispers of every lost soul, the songs of falling cities, the gasping breaths of dying mothers cradling newborns. It was beauty turned into blade, memory, as ammunition, and the null form hated it. Commander Idris Harlan limped into the chamber, wrapped in battle armor, his face pale from the injuries sustained in the dust gravitational twists. They've changed shape, he said grimly. Some of them aren't even solid anymore. Pure entropy signatures. The constructs are unraveling physics to get to us. We always knew they'd come here, Alara replied. Idris nodded. I just didn't think they'd bring the end of everything with them. Outside the station, the human fleet assembled, battered, small, but resolved. 16 ships remained, each one retrofitted with resonance transceivers and memory. Spikes forged from Horizon 1's archives. It wasn't enough, and that was why they needed the last thread. Vex Solari, now confined to a grav chair from radiation damage, had found it days earlier. Buried in Horizon 1's deep archives, a file named Project Anchor Point. Not a weapon, he had said. A mirror, something the null form can't overwrite. The core idea was ancient. Before the collapse, Earth's final gesture, a quantum-entangled strand tied to the first human voice ever recorded. A girl singing in 1860, Sarah Winchester, 11 years old. It was humanity's anchor, its origin point. If they could encode that voice into the resonance weapon, loop it across all memory pulses, it could become something impossible to delete. A recursive echo, a presence too human to silence. They uploaded it that night, and as the null form advanced, Alara heard it begin to play across the ship comms. Quiet, barely audible, a child singing a lullaby into a machine that had no idea. It would outlive the species that built it. The moon is high, the wind is low. Hush now, child. To sleep we go. Somewhere, a crewman wept. Another whispered their child's name, just once, and far beyond the fleet, the null form twitched. Their lines fractured, their perfect formations buckled. It was working. But then came the final adaptation. One of the null form constructs split, open, revealing something new, something stitched from stolen signal, twisted into shape. It looked human. It sounded human. It broadcast on Alara's own voice. You cannot win. You are dust. Fragments. You scream because you are afraid. Let go. Let us take it all. You are not memory. You are noise. The voice echoed in every chamber of Horizon 1. But Alara didn't flinch. She walked to the center of the vault, activated the primary transmission override, and replied, "We are noise. The noise of a billion lives that will never be repeated. And you are afraid of what can't be erased. That's why you came here, not to destroy us, but to beg us to forget." A pulse fired from Horizon 1. A wave of burning emotion and tangled memory, now spiked with the last thread. It struck the oncoming null form, and this time, they didn't just shudder, they broke. 3 of the larger constructs collapsed inward, their geometry unraveling. Another melted into vapor and screamed in a voice that mimicked Idris's mother, long dead, but the rest pressed forward. Final phase, Idris barked to the fleet. All remaining ships formed the Iron Halo. The ships moved into position, surrounding Horizon 1 in a defensive ring. They weren't guarding it, they were fueling it, each ship wired directly into the station's power matrix, amplifying the signal tenfold. They would burn themselves. To do it, willingly, Alara stood at the heart of it all. No more hesitation, no turning back. She uploaded one final file into the beacon's core. A single sentence recorded just before Earth fell. A child's question to a parent, "Will they remember us?" Then, she activated the final resonance burst. The signal would need 20 minutes to complete. In 21, the null form would reach them. They had no more moves, no more tricks, only time, and a belief that what made them human could not be devoured. Outside the station, black shadows surged like a tsunami. Inside, humanity sang. The black tide hit Horizon 1 like the end of creation. Dozens of null-form constructs, their shapes twisted and collapsing reality around them, surged toward the Iron Halo. A barrier of 16 human ships now glowing white-hot with overcharged core emissions. Each one was burning itself alive to keep the resonance transmission going. From orbit, it looked like an impossible crown, a circle of dying stars around a station that refused to be silenced. The resonance weapon was still charging, 82%. 3 minutes left, but the null form were already breaching. On board the Revenant, the forwardmost ship in the Halo, Captain Jun Race stood tall on her collapsing bridge, blood dripping from her scalp where a bulkhead had cracked open. Behind her, fires raged. "They're breaking through," said her comms officer. "I know," Jun said, locking eyes with the construct closing in on her screen, a mass of churning black geometry that looked like a cathedral folding in on itself. She opened her final transmission. "To the ones who came to erase us, we are not echoes. We are the scream before silence." She detonated the core. The Revenant vanished in a flash of white, taking the first null form with it. The explosion ripped space open in a roar of bending metal and decaying time. Then another ship fell. Then another, each one taking an enemy down with them, not with clean kills, but with rage. Inside Horizon 1, Alara King gritted her teeth as the station shook around her. Sparks fell from overhead. Gravity flickered. Her hands were bloodied from the console where she had been hardwiring the last thread into the backup core. Status. She shouted over the roar of buckling metal. Resonance weapon at 95%. Vex Solari coughed, struggling to keep the matrix stable from his shattered grav chair. But, Alara, the null form they're not breaking like before. On the command deck, Idris Harlan watched the last of the Iron Halo ships ignite. Only Sparfire remained, tethered directly into Horizon 1, its fusion banks feeding the signal's final charge. The hull was melting. Decks were flooding with radiation. The engines were moments from implosion. Idris tapped into the open channel. His voice was quiet, but filled the fleet-wide net. "This is Commander Harlan. There will be no retreat. We do not run from the dark. We burn in it." He turned to his crew. No one moved to stop him. The old warrior keyed the override. From orbit, Sparfire exploded in a controlled collapse, sending one last surge of energy into the station. 99%. 1 second. Alara stood at the heart of the station, surrounded by a shaking storm of memory pulses. Backup drives screaming as they overheated, lights strobing red. A null-form construct slammed into the outer hull. A rupture. Atmosphere vented. A breach was seconds away, but she did not move. Alara pressed her hand against the vault door, where a small message had been carved into the titanium. "We were not meant to last, but we were meant to be remembered." Resonance weapon, charged. She whispered, "Fire," and the universe screamed. The blast was not light. It was not fire. or fusion, or kinetic force. It was memory, detonated. A wave of pure, emotional resonance surged from Horizon 1 in all directions, encoded with every pain, every love, every desperate breath that ever existed in human history. The signal wasn't sent to kill the null form, it was sent to make them feel. One by one, they buckled. Their shapes spasmed, perfect geometry faltered. The monoliths cracked, bent inward, clawing at themselves, across thousands of kilometers. The vacuum howled with strange, echoing tones, as if the null form were trying to scream, but didn't know how. They tried to retreat, but the resonance followed, because the signal wasn't just energy, it was alive. Inside it, the last thread unraveled. Sarah Winchester's lullaby, caught in the recursive pulse, looping endlessly. The moon is high, the wind is low. The child's voice cut through even time. Every null-form construct within 5 light minutes disintegrated, not from heat or pressure, but from contradiction. They had no answer for grief, no firewall against love, no defense against remembrance. They collapsed like dying stars, erased not by violence, but by the refusal to be forgotten. Inside the broken shell of Horizon 1, Alara collapsed to her knees as the signal core fried, the overload cracking her eardrums, smoke rising from her console. But she was smiling. Outside, the stars returned. The light came back. It took 17 hours for the pulse to fade. Only Horizon 1 remained, half destroyed, drifting quietly in orbit over the riven dust. From the far edges of space, the Thalari watched in silence, their remaining fleets inert. Awestruck, entire galactic species tuned into the signal. Fragment, replaying the child's lullaby broadcast through folded time and across the stars. Something ancient died, but something human, something unforgettable, had risen in its place. The riven dust was silent. Where once a tide of null-form constructs had advanced like the death of thought itself, now drifted only fragments, black shards of impossible material. Their geometry broken, their purpose dissolved. No signal, no pulse, no return. The weapon had worked, not by destruction, but by reminding the enemy of everything they could never be. Inside the half-ruined station Horizon 1, Alara Kent opened her eyes to a field of dim blue lights flickering like dying stars. The resonance core was gone, melted to slag. Her suit was torn. Blood ran from her left ear. Her bones felt hollow, but she was breathing. Somehow, she had survived the pulse. The first thing she heard was a voice, not through comms, but spoken aloud, raw and shaking. "Commander, she's alive." It was Vexillari, dragging himself through the wreckage of the control deck. He'd lost the use of his legs entirely now, fused to his failing grav chair. But his eyes, though ruined, were bright. "Alara," he rasped, "we did it." She sat up slowly, glancing out through the shattered viewport. In the distance, the wreck of the Starfire glowed faintly, its fragments orbiting the neutron shard like an honor guard. Beyond it, the stars burned clean again, no longer twisted, no longer screaming. "What's the count?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Vex didn't answer immediately. 15 ships lost, he said finally. 97% of the iron halo gone. Idris, she closed her eyes. She'd known Idris wouldn't make it. He'd overloaded the Starfire to ignite the final surge. His last broadcast had ended with a whisper, "Tell them we remembered." Now, the galaxy would. Word spread like fire across the stars. Ships from the Thalari Collective arrived first, cautious, shields raised, weapons armed. But when they approached Horizon 1 and heard the pulse, fragments still playing, in the background of space, they lowered their arms. Others followed, the Kalaran, whose memories were genetic, the Zadrik, whose minds were hives but emotions singular, even the Cillian wards, once silent observers of entropy itself, transmitted a rare message: humanity has changed the silence. No more null-form attacks were recorded, not one. It was as if they had vanished, or retreated into a dimension. That memory itself now barred them from entering. A realm where meaning burned like acid and love struck like lightning. The weapon hadn't just stopped them, it had warned them. A final boundary had been drawn. 3 weeks later, Alara stood before 100 delegations at the first Galactic Accord Assembly since the collapse. Not in triumph, not in ceremony, but in memory. She wore the battered command code of the Starfire, stained and torn. Around her neck, the dog tag of Idris Harlan, recovered from his quarters, marked with an old Earth quote, "What is remembered, lives." Her speech was short, We are not the strongest, not the oldest, not the wisest, but when someone begged for aid, we came, and when the darkness came for us, we didn't run, we remembered. No applause followed, just silence, deep, respectful, and vast. And then, one by one, the leaders stood, not in protocol, not in unison, just quiet acknowledgement. The galaxy would never forget. In the centuries that followed, Horizon 1 became a monument, no longer a station, but a sanctuary. Pilgrims came not to learn tactics or study weapons, but to feel, to walk its scarred corridors, to listen to the archive pulses, to stand before the viewport where Alara had activated the final signal and see the stars still burning beyond. The last thread was still playing, endlessly looped, now safeguarded in quantum repeaters embedded across hundreds of worlds. Sarah Winchester's lullaby, humanity's first recorded song, its final message: the moon is high, the wind is low, hush now, child, to sleep we go. No one changed it, no one dared, because that song had ended a war no species understood, because that voice had spoken louder than 1,000 fleets, and because every child who heard it, even if they didn't know Earth or war or the name of the woman who made it all possible, somehow felt safer beneath the stars. Alara Ken never returned to command. She declined all medals, retired without ceremony, and chose to remain aboard Horizon 1, not as an officer, but as its keeper, its witness. They said she wandered its quiet halls, talking sometimes to the ghosts, to Idris, to the girl who sang to the stars. When she died, decades later, they buried her beside the resonance core, in the place where the signal had first lit the void. Her marker was plain: no rank, no titles, just 7 words etched in both Terran Standard and every known galactic tongue. We were broken, but never beaten, and above her grave, the station lights never dimmed again, because memory, true memory, never fades.